Hello, anyone who's listening. Okay, we are spiritual beings in a physical body. Our thought, our feelings, our emotions, combined with what we think, creates a tangible physical reality. We do this unintentionally all the time, and we are not aware of it because we do not see that we are any sort of creators, even though that's essentially, in my humble opinion, what we really are. We are not what we think we are. We are simple creators. And I say simple creators because we are not we're not universal creators. We don't create big stuff. We create small stuff. But because we are spiritual beings and we are creators with our thinking and our feeling and emotion, and that we are also connected to other human beings and to life forms, any spiritual life forms. Now, I don't know myself what are spiritual life forms. In other words, I don't know myself personally what is really a spiritual physical life form. I assume and I know that human beings, real, authentic, natural human beings, are that in their natural, authentic state. But there could be other things that also are spiritual. I have not said this before, but like animals, right? So animals, many animals can be spiritual beings, I would think. I could be wrong, but they would have some spirit anyway. Some would have some spirit. Human beings, because they are a bit more advanced, therefore they have much more. In other words, I'm saying that animals could have spirit like a human being, but they may not create because they're not as advanced. But they can still be spirit, and therefore we would be connected to them too if they are spirit. This could apply to other things. I do not know. I really don't know, because I know that sometimes I'm attracted to certain things over my life, and I've wondered why. Now, maybe that was because subconsciously I might be attracted to another spirit, whatever form it takes. And I think this is how it's probably meant to be, But because because I myself have not acknowledged that I'm a spiritual being all my life. Therefore, if I say, just a silly example, okay, supposing I picked up a pebble for no reason and looked at it, I did that subconsciously. Now, is there something in that pebble that made me pick it up? This is a ridiculous example, because obviously if I use an animal as an example, you're going to get it. But I'm saying that I don't know. I'm saying there could be a little something in some things that we're not aware of. But I don't know this. I could be very wrong on this. But I would definitely think that organic life forms, like living things, animals, birds, some of the things we see around us, would definitely have some spirit in them. And I would think that if a human being is at their normal level of a bit of spirituality, obviously we're all at very low spirituality, I would say. I know that myself, but I think that we are meant to be much, much higher, and that was our original destiny, shall we say. But we took a different route, so we're now on a non-spiritual path, which means that we're limited, in my opinion. So we've limited ourselves by taking a different path, and the more we go away from spirituality, the more we limit ourselves even physically. in my opinion. I could be wrong, because I think that at a high spiritual level you connect even to your body more, or the body that is not being used, that is not at its high potential either. So I'm saying the original human being would have been a very advanced physical and mental being. But when I say mental, I don't mean intellect, even though that is what we now value. That's the path we've taken. That's a different path, in my opinion. I'm not saying that if you are spiritually advanced that you won't be intellectually advanced, because intellect is a strange word, because we assume it a certain way. I don't take that word intellect to mean the same as what another person would now. Not now. In the past I would, but not now. Now I would say that when you are at a high spiritual level, you just know everything. So surely if you know everything, that actually means that you are probably at a high intellectual level by the standards of what normal people would think. Because if you know everything and you're aware of everything and you understand how everything works and you brought your body up to a level that it is superhuman, obviously, but it really has nothing to do with the intellect, in my opinion. This is only my opinion. It is not at the intellectual level or the way that we think about intellect, or what I would have thought about intellect all my life. That intellect has nothing to do with spirituality, has nothing to do with knowing everything, has nothing to do with making your body super human, almost, you could say, because actually superhuman is just how we were meant to be. But we would, if I saw how I was meant to be now, I would say that is supernatural somehow. I would say it's not possible, and it would not be a human thing. But in reality, if we were mentally and physically operating and had not took the wrong path, had not took the path of intervention, shall we say, because I'm saying that there must have been intervention or something to make us take a different path, because we're not spiritual beings now. So we took a totally physical path, which is like technical or non-spiritual, and that's the path we're on now, and headed towards going over the cliff, in my opinion, but that's only my opinion. But for some, it will be okay, in the sense that once you become totally physical and you lose that spirituality, it's a bit like someone used to say to me years ago, what you don't have, you don't miss. So most of us won't be even aware of what we've lost or what we're missing out on. We will think that taking the physical route is the best route, and that anything technical and physical that benefits us is an enhancement. We will think that, because we won't know what we should have been originally. In my fairyland, fantastic, kind of depressing in a way of looking at things, because obviously it doesn't make me feel good to say, hey, this is what I am now, and I think, hey, I should have been something else. And that was the natural process. I say natural process, just a totally natural thing. If we hadn't taken a different path, or there hadn't been intervention, or whatever you like, it would have just happened without intellect, just being. Because that's what we were. Just as an animal, your baby is born and it grows, but it can develop into something mentally confused if it's in the wrong environment. We put ourselves in a wrong environment. We surrounded ourselves with an unnatural environment that was not conducive to us developing and expanding and flourishing. The seed was planted, but the tree never grew, because it wasn't watered and put with the right soil. It was in an alien environment. that stopped it from developing into a beautiful big tree, if you want to look at it that way. And I'm being very fancy there, almost poetic, and actually I'm not, but I must be really feeling it somehow. But that's probably true, because when you get distressed by something, it actually does give you that emotion. And as I've said before, the emotion, if it's real emotion, I'm not talking about fake emotion, because most of the world we live in a world surrounded by actors. Anyone can fake emotion. You only have to look at your movies to see the best actors in the world. And they're more believable than what I am, or anyone else for that matter, because, they are good at that. But that will not create anything. That only influences. Fake acting, fake emotions influence. They don't create. But they can create a different world, because if you influence real humans with, false emotions, and you believe that to be real, then you will go along with, it's a bit like if you fall in love with the wrong person. And we've all went with, that's part of the deception too, when you go with wrong humans that are not authentic spiritual human beings, but are false acting human beings that pretend to be real, and they and you like them, you go along with them, but they are only there to control you or to influence you, and that influence will be for their benefit, not for yours, and we've all done that in relationships, and that's why we end up at an even lower spiritual level without getting personal. But it is personal, because it all starts at an individual level in a funny kind of way. Because, I've said this before, if I had made the personal, individual, simple little right decisions most of my life, I wouldn't have a negative world quite so much around me, or at least it wouldn't bother me so much. And maybe also there would be, if you pick the right individuals around you, or even if you go it alone, sometimes you're better off in some cases, if you are like me and you can't discern between the actors and the real, which I never could. No, I have to say that. I like to think that I can see it a bit more now, but I could still probably be fooled, because a good actor will look the same as an authentic, real human being who's really feeling everything. I've said this before. It's just, in fact, sometimes they can be more impressive, because we get muddled up because we have been sidetracked and confused and whatever. And I'm getting that way now and gone off the track. I am sorry. Wasn't meant to be talking individual. Where was I? Oh, well, look, either way, yeah, the intellect, that's right. The intellect is the enemy of a human being. But we think it is the greatest thing now. We think it is our future, and we think that is all we are. And we think that is, the more we can advance the intellect, because that's what we're told, and we admire people who have the high intellect. We don't admire the people who appear to be simplistic, silly little spirit beings. We would think they are foolish, probably, and that they are dim, as I would have in the past. Not that I would have judged as much as most, but at the same time, I certainly was very impressed by people that appeared to have high intellect, high education, there's all the things that I didn't actually have, okay? And so maybe you could say now, well, that's why she's jealous, so that's why she's saying the opposite now, because this makes her and her type of losers in this world, because that's what we look like, appear to be better. That's okay too. I would have thought that too, and if you think that, that's okay. Because you're not entirely wrong, because yes, we are the losers in the sense that we are down the bottom. And yes, knowing that you're a spiritual being and actually getting yourself back up are two different things. That makes you depressed, so therefore the vibration and the frequency is low, so therefore you are defeating the purpose, because as I've said before, it's also all frequency and vibration. My emotion is a frequency and vibration, and that affects what is around me. The whole idea is to, I think, this is in my fantasy way of looking at it, I think the whole idea is to push the frequency. And this can only be done by spiritual beings, or only be done by people who have raised their vibration and therefore their spirit and are thinking good thoughts. In other words, I suppose you could put it simply that way. Who are content with themselves, content with the world no matter what it is, and are sending out, how you do this I do not know, but this is what you're supposed to do. And the worse the world gets, then the harder it is to do that. In fact, it becomes an almost insurmountable challenge to do this, even if you know it, because it's like, if someone is attacking you, how do you, turn the other cheek and smile back? It becomes like that. But that's the challenge. And if you're not very sporty like me and don't like confrontation and don't like fighting and actually prefer to walk away, then the challenge is even harder still. For some people, because we're in a competitive world, a lot of people like competition, so they're fine with that. They might still find it hard, but they're not adverse to being competitive and confronting things. I'm not like that. And I'm not comfortable even making the videos. In fact, when I first started to make the very first video, I had no intentions of saying all the stuff I'm saying and did not know most of the stuff that I even know now. I just essentially thought I would try to change the minds of a few human beings that were almost local, you could say, hoping to say, well, look, not change your minds, but change your actions. Because, your actions do represent your mind. So you have to be convinced one way or the other that what we're doing is not constructive to our future. And it isn't. We're not. That if we are negative and fighting, we think it doesn't matter, but it does, because we don't know that we're spiritual beings, and therefore that vibration actually has a creative thing. See, if we actually just knew that simple fact, or what I think is a fact anyway, instead of thinking that we're all physical and that we're not spiritual at all and that we don't have that isn't what we are, that's impossible to convince people. So actually, you almost have to convince people at a physical level. And that's actually, in a way, you almost then have to come from a physical aspect. And that is very hard to do, because I've gone off track here, but because the physical is the deception. The physical is only what the matrix, which is the world around us. When I say the matrix, I mean the world around us. The world is the matrix. It's a controlled world. It operates through telling us what is the reality. It tells me what's going on in another place. I don't go there. I am told what is going on, and I believe it. So that's the matrix, that's the world. The world is not, we're not all isolated in this world, and so therefore we are reliant on, the communications and the technology to inform us as to what our world is. And it's how we interpret that will determine how we how we live in the world, I suppose. I've gone completely silly here. I've gone way off the track, and I'm sure you think I don't know what I'm talking about. And maybe I don't. But anyway, that's not going too much into the world thing. I don't do that. I'm not interested in that aspect. The practicalities of the world are not what I tend to talk about. Even though, if I did, a lot of people would probably be more on my wavelength, because that's how most people operate. And you can have it reflected, but I think I'll leave that for other people to do that. It's not something that I'm that comfortable with, and it's not something that I don't delve into the physical world to that extent. I don't follow what's going on a lot in the world, and I've chose not to, and I just don't. Just never, never interested me in the past. Anyway, never interested me in the past. Now I see the results of things, but it's a matrix, so it's what is put from the matrix to me or you or human beings is how we are going to then react. We react to the matrix, as I've said before. The matrix could react to us, probably, if there was a large number of us that were all reacting the same way, but we don't do that. I know that myself. I'm isolated. I'm reacting totally on my own. Well, not totally in the sense that there may be someone on the other side of the world that thinks or is reacting the same way, but that's still a long way away. It would be better if it was like right here, because what is around me is going to affect me much more than what is on the other side of the world, which is interesting. Some people might beg to differ on that. That depends on the person too, but personally I mainly react to what is in my immediate environment, because that's what you have to deal with on a daily basis, But at any rate, I've gone off the track again. Yes, okay, the intellect. Back to the intellect. The imaginary intellect that we're all supposed to have. I think it's imaginary. And you say, well, of course she thinks it's imaginary because she does not have any, because she's not talking any sense. She's always talking in fantasies. And that is true. But I think in my fantasy way of looking at intellect now is the reverse of what I think we were meant to be, or what I was meant to be. Okay, let's just talk about me then, instead of saying what others, because it is a personal thing. Each person has that right to make their own choice and their own thinking about themselves. But I would say that I was on the other side of the fence for most of my life. So it's not like I don't understand the worship of intellect, because it's a worship of something that is false, in my opinion. But that's just me, and I worshipped it my life. I didn't have it, but I still worshipped it in other people. But anyway, intellect is the reverse of spirituality. Human beings, this just come to me the other way, human beings are like genies in a bottle. I think that's a song, A Genie in a Bottle. And I'm sure they're laughing at me, because some of the people that write the songs, I'm sure, are at a much more, probably at a higher spiritual level, rightly or wrongly, whatever their actual thinking about the world is, or what their actual who or what they, I don't know. But the thing is, sometimes you can even be, you can be spiritual, you could be spiritual, I would imagine, but I don't know this. You could be spiritual, but you could be spiritual in a negative way too. In other words, you could be aware of some abilities, but you may not necessarily use them in a positive way. It would depend on your mindset. Like if I'm feeling very depressed and negative, like I say, you're not going to create something good. And if I had even more spirituality and I became negative, I've gone way off here, I have to admit. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I'm just surmising, I'm trying to get my thoughts straight here, and they're not coming. I would imagine that you could be at a higher spiritual level, but you are not using that for positive, because you are a negative being. No, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to leave that alone. Sorry about that. Should be deleting this video. I do have a point there, but I'm not going there, okay? I was trying to make something, say something. But anyway, what I am going to say is that, yes, human beings are genies in a bottle, I think. Potential genies, but they're in the bottle. Remember I Dream of Jeannie, the TV show? I used to watch it. Jeannie was in the bottle for thousands of years before the astronaut come along and accidentally found the bottle lying on the beach, and he opened the bottle and Jeannie come out. Jeannie could do anything. Jeannie had supernatural ability. She could just click her fingers and create anything she wanted, as humans should. But she was in the bottle for thousands of years. And that's what I am. And that's what you are. And that's what a lot of humans are. They're genies stuck in a bottle with a stopper closed in so that they can't get out and ever reach their full potential or develop that way. They're in a closed area. She was safe in the bottle. She survived all that time. She had her little, like we all are. Some of us have a better little house than others, a better surroundings. Mine's pretty not so great at the moment. But, you know, some people have mansions, but they're still not allowed to go much outside the mansion, if you follow what I'm saying. But anyway, that's the thing. Genie in a bottle. But the bottle is imaginary in the sense that we're not aware that we're in the bottle with the stopper put down so that we can't smoke and rise out and just create whatever we want. Yeah, that sounds real good, doesn't it? But anyway, if I've still got some space left here, because I can't, I've got limited resources at the moment with the mobile thing. I might try, if I can get my thoughts straight, which I'm not very good at, going back to, for the third time I think, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and the fantasy fairy tale story of what some people think took place in the heaven and the earth, which I say is a matrix, but it's the same thing. But back then it may not have been quite as much of a matrix, because it might have been different to what it is now. You know, because things have changed. Now, whether you want to say it's still the same old earth, but it's just become more artificial because of the fact that we have become more artificial, and because we have invented so much technology and we don't operate naturally. We no longer dig in the dirt with our hands. We now use machines, etc., etc. That is okay. Or if you want to say that original earth is nothing but a fantasy now. Because in my fantasy it would have been much more totally organic, as we are. But then again, we seem to create what appears to be organic. This is where even I get confused, and I'll have to think about this more. And so I better be quiet, because otherwise I'm making myself look ignorant, which I actually am in many ways. Like I do not understand everything at all. It probably doesn't really matter, in a sense, that we are here and we have to deal with what is. So maybe in a way it now doesn't matter if what was once more organic is now more artificial, because it's a battle of the mind more now, which maybe is why it is still here. Some have said that it is deliberately allowed to be for that purpose. That's assuming that there is another power that has the power to take things away or to change things. The matrix itself is a controlled system by an entity that does have much power, but at the same time the human being is like the engine, I would think, for that power, because otherwise why are the humans still here when it's an artificial world, if you follow me? Because they really shouldn't be necessary, but they are a kind of organic engine, a worker for the matrix, even though they themselves are spiritual beings and therefore should not really be in a matrix. Probably it'd be like you wouldn't put organic animals in a plastic environment. You would put them with trees and soil and stuff that is natural for their benefit. So if you put them in a different environment, it's going to be much more of a challenge, and this environment is a challenge for the organic, natural, spiritual human beings. Even if you're at a low spiritual level like me, you're still a human being. So it just means that you're at low capacity for everything. So that means the matrix will push you round to its heart's content, which is my own fault, because the matrix operates that way, and that is the idea. It is it's a push-pull thing. It's continuously trying to pulling against you. It could be, for some people, if they can get their spirituality and their vibration up, this can be a benefit, because they will grow and learn, and therefore they will use the matrix to their advantage. This is how it's meant to be, I would think, but it's because the frequency is so low, the matrix has pushed everything right into one, like I say, if you got it like this and that, they've pushed it all to one side. There's no balance anymore. Humans are meant to push up against and make a balance, to where, as I've said this before, to where it's not too much one way or the other. But they can't do that because they're, but they keep the matrix going. They seem to be an essential worker for the matrix. Now, whether this will always be, and that depends on how many humans are operating at some sort of creative level in the matrix. Dismiss everything I just said. I don't think it makes too much sense. Well, you can take it and use it for your own whatever, but see, these things are not clearly shown to me. or to you or to anyone, because if you were at a higher spiritual level, you would have that knowledge. You would become aware much more of what is going on around you. You would understand the matrix, whereas humans don't understand the matrix. The matrix understands them, but they don't understand the matrix. Okay? Yes. So, but I shall go back and try to finish the little fantasy story about the heaven. And it is a fantasy story because I have not studied any of the books or literature or stuff that that I will be taking little bits from. I just hear about something. You know, I'm the sort of person that I could read a headline on the paper and I'll make a story from that. But I won't read the whole article. So the headline may have nothing to do with the whole story. You know what I'm saying? You know that yourself. They use the headlines to get your attention. But you have to really read the whole story to know what it's really about. So that's why I say my stuff is fantasy at that level. But I'm a firm believer myself in fantasies. I am a firm believer in intuition, which is the opposite to intellect, as I've said before. Intuition is what comes without analysing something. It just comes naturally. Intellect is where you think about something, based on physical information usually. I do hope that the matrix is not too noisy out there for you or for me. I'm trying to make sure that my sound is here. I don't even know if it's working. I hope so. But at any rate, I'll try to finish the story because I don't even know what to really think about that story in a way. But you have the heaven. I think I said this in the other one. You have a heaven. That is something outside of the matrix. That is what is outside of the matrix, I would imagine. Everything that is outside of the earth. The earth is the matrix. But the matrix could also extend around the earth because it must extend a little bit around so that we have the illusion of a big universe, which may or may not be true because I don't know how big the matrix is, okay? You know, because I haven't even been hardly outside of my own city, much less up into the skies and the matrix, okay? But in the heaven, you had a so-called creator. I said before it could be like a family, okay? And I was comparing it to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yes. I'm sorry about there's a little bit of noise going on. The matrix is going to be a little noisy today, as it is a lot of days actually, because the matrix is very mechanical. You know, we live in a mechanical world. We no longer do things by hand. If we have to clean up something, we don't use our broom and shovel like we used to. We use a mechanical device which makes a lot of noise. Noise is vibration and frequency that goes into the human being. Not always a beneficial thing to clear thinking, I would personally say, and I think most people would probably agree with that. So it's a bit hard for me to concentrate when, when there is stuff being done. But at any rate, the heaven, the universe outside of the matrix, a family, a lot of beings, perhaps. I don't know this. But let's say a creator that created the human, as I've said before, but this would have been like a seed, planted a seed. The human had, you could say the human had the DNA of the Creator, okay? If you want to look at it at a realistic level or at a practical level or even an intellectual level, which I'm not big on. In other words, at a kind of factual, material, physical level. So the DNA of the Creator, just like when you have a child, your DNA will be the DNA of the baby, combined with your partner, assuming you make a natural male-female human baby, which, is probably not always the case. But that's just an example anyway. But the DNA of you or your two partners would go into the baby. And so that was like the creation of the seed. The creation, the baby, was the seed, the human being, that was meant to grow into a big tree or a full human being, which it does, but it's meant to develop many, many, many skills as well as it grows. And depending on the environment, the baby or the child will develop different skills. Some will develop more skills, might be more advanced at a physical and mental level than others, if you want to look at it in a practical way. My own personal thing is that it's all spiritual, or that left alone a spiritual baby will automatically, provided the environment is reasonably neutral, not negative. And when I say negative, I mean negative to the spirituality. It may be beneficial to the physicality. If you want to get a certain job in a certain field, then it may be beneficial to that. But it won't be beneficial to the spiritual, because you're probably only going to develop a certain amount of skills. And also, if that is your whole environment, then you won't be a guru out in the desert meditating, will you? You will be at school learning your science or your mathematics or your whatever it is, or whatever, even physical skill like outside now. Although if you're just using a mechanical thing very simplistically, as they are, probably doesn't require a great deal of learning, shall we say. But it's impressive, the sound, if nothing else, isn't it? It's loud, and it's technology at its highest or lowest, depending on which angle you want to come from, But that's opinion, But at any rate, we have I am finding the vibration a little strong at the moment. I picked the wrong time to make the video. And I'm laughing, but I actually don't think it's funny, because I don't always have the energy to do these things. And I find it hard to concentrate on my silly stuff, as it is. Like these stories, like I just have to go with the flow, and it's not coming if there's other distractions. But the heaven is outside of the matrix, okay, in the fantasy original story, maybe even. I would say that it would be good for people to investigate all these little stories, all these things. I haven't done that. As I say, I pick the headline on the paper and don't read the whole article. Now, the heaven, and in the heaven, the Creator the main being, the creator being, seeded his children on an earth originally, I guess. Not sure, of course, originally. Garden of Eden, whatever you like. The garden was conducive to the development of the offspring. The seed was planted in the Garden of Eden, and the Garden of Eden had the right soil, the right conditions to make that seed grow into a tree, or a baby into the advanced spiritual human being, or, into a genie, if you like. But there was intervention, and so the genie was put in the bottle. Because the genie liked and was tempted to have a look inside the bottle, and the genie liked the being that showed them the bottle. He said, here, you'll be comfortable in here. You can go in there and meditate and expand and become the spiritual being you are meant to be. And the spiritual being believed the being that to go inside the bottle would be to their advantage, and to meditate in the bottle as opposed to meditating in the Garden of Eden where there was all natural stuff. And that's what we've been doing ever since. But anyway, that's me going off the track. I don't know where I get these things from, I really don't. But I don't even know if you can hear me because it is a little bit loud out there. Now, the Garden of Eden, like I say, that was the Garden of Eden, but we'll go back to the heaven with the family and the beings that were in the heaven. Now, in the heaven, as I said, in this fantasy story which I have been told and have very little real knowledge of, so I'm going to make a lot of it up, okay? But there was many beings, probably many fantastic beings with the Creator in the heaven. Now, one of these, as the story goes, was called Lucifer. And he or she, this being, which is a being that is not the same as, I wouldn't think it's the same as the male-female that were implanted in the Garden of Eden. No, I wouldn't think that. It would have been a different being. Very spiritual should have been, I would imagine, but and was greatly admired by the Creator, God, being. I shouldn't use that word God, sorry. But old habits die hard. I have been conditioned by a lifetime of the Matrix and by knowledge, so-called knowledge, information. So, I'm in fairyland in trying to piece together even a story, and it is a fairy tale because it comes from different sources, and it may or may not be 100% even. It could even be not even remotely accurate. So it is a fairy tale, but I can't even concentrate to tell my fairy tales here because there's a fairy tale going on outside, but it's a little bit loud. They're telling their fairy tale and it's a bit louder than mine, unfortunately, so mine must be no good. But I can't really concentrate. I'm losing the concentration here. I'm very sorry. One was called Lucifer. At least this is the fairy tale because, in the original, what I was taught at school, not that I did much of this, I have to admit, so I probably got it wrong. There was supposedly God, and then there was Satan or Lucifer or whatever. Different names I would personally say down through the years anyway, because I don't have a good historical history of the real history or even the alternative history, which is like ancient gods and things. I don't know all that. But I think there's validity perhaps, and I'm incorporating most of it into the fairy tale story. Okay, so the Lucifer character did not like the creator God that admired him and loved him, did not think it was a good idea, as I've said before. This is what I'm told in the fantasy story, and I'm extending it, did not think it was a good idea for a god to create lots of little gods, especially giving those little gods the ability to make a vast number, because in the heaven there would have been at this time, I would think, a more finite number of the gods or the beings that were there. Now, even this is probably putting it so simply and not accurately, I would think. Because all this is beyond our thinking, because we are the genies in the bottle now. So even outside the bottle, we'd have to fathom it out, but we would know more. Even just in this matrix. But to be in the bottle means that we, even when I'm talking about this, all thoughts are coming to me and thinking, but hey, a creator God would be creating all the time anyway, so it couldn't be as finite. But still, that might just be creating what is around, like humans do, where they can visualize something and with emotion and feeling bring it into a tangible substance almost, but that's still not the same as creating your own kind, creating another creator, you see, or the potential to be another creator. But Lucifer was not keen on this idea, and he did not want to water the seeds because he was so special and so admired, and thought that it was better to keep only a finite number of the gods, you could say. Is that the right word? I'm sure it's not. A bit like some people don't want to have children, okay? They're like, hey, I'm enough, I'm special. And especially if you're immortal, you're like, no need to, because we don't think we are immortal. But if you're a god, you would be immortal. Or if you were a being outside of the matrix, a creator god, a creator being, you would be immortal, I would think. So you probably, some might not have seen the purpose in having offspring. In fact, might have said, hey, I don't want to have offspring because that distracts from me, because then you are not so special because you have got little versions of yourself around in a funny kind of way. And also you will have to exert your effort and time into that. Yes. But anyway, that's a little bit of the story there. I will diverge back. As I said, I don't know whether I finished it, to Snow White. There's a comparison here, I think, but I don't know. That is a real fairy tale from my youth, but they're all fairy tales. Fairy tales are not real, they're what you make of them. If you're like me and you believe in fairy tales, as I always have, I believe in the old fairy tales and I believe in the new ones, and I believe in all fairy tales. But that's just me. Most people don't. They say they're fiction, their imagination, but you can still learn something from them, I think. I don't think it matters if something is actually the whole truth. If it has something you can get out of it, that's the whole idea of fairy tales anyway. Like, is to show certain things, like the Snow White. It was to show, something. Because the truth has to be shown in the Matrix anyway, and it is shown in different ways, I think. So I tend to believe most things, okay? But that is, but to be fair, to be accurate even, the Matrix is not. It is a mass of fairy tales where there is, look, there's probably a truth, a bottom line truth to most things, but because the Matrix is operated by an entity that goes from right to wrong, black to white, love to hate, and continually pushes the human being to test them almost, uses them because they're a necessary part to keep the Matrix going at this point, I would think, because we're still here, some of us. You have to have workers, even if you're a king or a queen, or if you're a god. You still have to have slaves and workers underneath you to do the menial tasks that you don't want to do. And this was the problem, I think, with Satan, Lucifer, goes by other technical names, other gods that have been worshipped down through the years that I do not have familiarity with. But this is a being that has been around since the beginning, with the Creator, in the fairy tale, in the heaven. So down through the centuries and thousands of years, different names, different times, maybe even different, shall I say, transformations, because this being has not stayed the same, I don't think. This Satan has not stayed the same, because this Satan likes technology, and because it rebelled and did not and lost a lot of the spirituality because it was injured, contaminated, I'm told. Left the heavens, got injured, contaminated, traumatized. So therefore, the spirituality and the mind went right down to like we are, that's what, down to that low level. And so therefore became familiar with technology as a means to try to get back power, to make a different world, to operate somehow, and the more this happened, then the more this being became less and less spiritual, as we have, and as can happen, because the material and the mechanical is the opposite to spirituality. One is totally imaginary, almost you could say. The other is totally solid and tangible. Well, we know this, we know this anyway. We know this. But I'm not putting this well again, and I am being sidetracked too by things around me, unfortunately. Now, perhaps I better finish up. Perhaps I better finish up the video. I don't think I'm ever going to get this tale finished. But at any rate, can I say that the comparison between this is the word analogy in the heaven? You know, the resentment that the being Lucifer had for the seeds of the Creator being put here on earth became quite strong, because they did not agree with this idea and did not want to be a father or a mother to the children. Like I say, some people don't want to have children, you know, and it was like this in a way, whereas the Creator decided this was a good idea, and but expected Lucifer or Satan to oversee this to some extent. But like I say, perhaps at the normal spiritual level that this being was, when he was greatly admired and was second to none in the heaven, I'm told, you know, because the Creator idolized this being and put him on a pedestal as well. This is how the story goes, because he had many gifts and was exceedingly beautiful in many ways. He was not the same as the humans. Because the God Creator had made the humans into two separate human beings, and they were meant to combine, to create, and to expand the kingdom or the spiritual life of the Creator God. I don't know where that come from, what I just said, but you know, which is kind of like when you have children. Some people actually have that idea, these children are part of me and they will carry on some of me. Some might go a totally different direction, but the idea, but usually if the environment was conducive and you were loving parents and we weren't all messed up like we are and have been, to where we end up ruining our only offspring, as even I have done, because we are not perfect parents for our children, and we don't set up a perfect environment. You know, we set up the genie in the bottle situation just as we were the genies put in the bottle. So we pass that on now, instead of passing on and creating a good Garden of Eden, shall we say. No, we don't do that. We don't give the good soil for the seed to grow into a beautiful tree that, you know. And the trees communicate with the other trees. I think this is quite possible even in the world that we live in. That, you know, because I've gone off track here, but, you know, when I was talking about spirits and stuff, how maybe spirit can be in living things. It doesn't just have to be in a human being or in animals or the life things that are most... It could be in other life forms too, I would imagine, to a lesser degree probably. But I don't even know that. For all I know, the trees could be more spiritually advanced than the humans now because we have sunk so low. But I would imagine that we were meant to be, the best in a way. But now we're probably the worst because we're at that low level, and that is the. I know I think that sometimes, and a lot of people say this even, like the animals behave better than us. But this is partially true, but not totally true because, if you look around, animals don't animals certainly don't do things as vastly corruptly as what we seem to, but and because they do keep it more simple. But even the animals can be still corrupted by the environment too, and the trees and the nature. But I think that I've gone way off track and don't know what I'm talking about. But I do think it is. Some people do think it is possible for trees to communicate with other trees, so there could be spirit there. You know, I would not disagree with this, but it's not something you can prove one way or the other. It's just fantasy once again. But either way, a lot of people don't agree with, these days don't agree with a lot of the way that the environment is, the natural environment is not what it was. But we still agree with technology and agree with using mechanical things. We don't go back to, see, it's very hard to have it one way or the other. So I can understand why we get confused, and this is part of the problem. And it is confusing because we now can't survive or almost live without the world that we have created. And yet many people see it as opposition to the natural world, which it would no doubt be. Whether they see that as also detrimental to their natural self and to their spiritual being is another thing. They've probably got it separate. Most people, I think a lot of people seem to have it separate. I would personally say it's all one in the same, but like I say, that would only be an opinion and an idea that may or may not be true. But, like I say, if it's a fairy tale, I think it's a fairy tale, and I believe in fairy tales. It's what I think, but what I think is not what someone else thinks. And that's the challenge of the Matrix, is for each person to decide and think what they think about it themselves. That is the challenge, I think. It is a challenge. It shouldn't be a challenge, I don't think. I think the world should be simple. I'm not at the capacity to deal with all these challenges myself. I think the world should be simple, and I think that if you keep it simple and you realise that underneath it all, this is only what I think, that everything is simple underneath, all the rest becomes confusion. And we're not equipped to deal with all this confusion. You talk about intellect, like I say, the intellect is all about that, and it is people battling with the confusion. But I don't think that we should have to need all that intellect. I don't think I should have to be dealing with all the confusion. It should just be whatever is, whatever you are is. Animals don't do that. They don't deal with that. They exist. They exist. And if you exist and you actually are creating by your just very existence, that is all there really is. That's putting it right down to. It's like saying bringing something down to an atom, which I certainly don't understand and wouldn't even know if it's true or not. I would not. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there is validity to some of the science. If the science is actually controlled by a human thinking and by frequency and vibration, which comes from a human being, then none of that matters, whether it's true or not, whether there is a real physical thing or whether there is less of it. It's just not relevant to the basics of what, the human being is. And that's where we can't get round that. I can't get round it either, because the physical is so strong, and not knowing that it is just all a mental thing. How can you think that everything is just imagination when it's in front of you? It's a contradiction. But that's just a lack of us not seeing. If you're a genie and you're in a bottle and you don't know you're a genie, it's just a lack of seeing yourself as a trapped human being in a bottle instead of a genie trapped in a bottle, because you've never been out of the bottle to know what you can do. If we had been like in the TV thing where Jeannie was trapped in the bottle when she was already a genie, but she got put by some other master genie, a bigger genie, or got tricked by a bigger genie, which is very much like the Garden of Eden, yes, once again, and like the heaven and all this sort of thing, where there is trickery, where a slightly more cunning genie tricked Jeannie into going into the bottle. But Jeannie was already a genie, whereas humans didn't know they were a genie. At least I don't think they would have. But, they might have known something, but they still got tricked either way. It seems strange that a genie would be tricked by another genie that probably may not have even been as powerful. But, intelligent people, as you know in life, can fall in love and be tricked by other humans that are not as intelligent into following them and doing all sorts of things. That has certainly been my experience. So it doesn't, and that's not saying, I'm not saying that I'm more intelligent or something like that. No, I'm just saying that you can realise that what you thought was someone or something much, much, much bigger and better than yourself, they, as you know, over the years, you get to know people and then you start to say, hey, that person is not as advanced as what I thought. So you've been tricked, you've been misled into being impressed and following that person, taking their instructions even, as I've done in life. So it's the same thing. So a lesser genie could theoretically, I suppose, trick a more advanced genie into going in the bottle. And so the genie is then in the bottle but can't get out. So they know they're a genie. So when they get out, they can then go back to being a genie and, creating and clicking their fingers and creating whatever they want, like the TV show. But if the genie was put in the bottle before they had become aware that they were a genie or developed their skills as a genie, especially if that genie is connected to other genies, humans connected to other humans, then you've got a really complicated situation. So then the lesser genie has the all power, and then the lesser genie creates the matrix, the bottle. And they become very powerful because they can use the genie in the bottle, keeping them in the bottle, but use all their power in the bottle. I'm not making sense. The story is not making sense. I apologise. I'm not putting it right. See, if I was a little bit more advanced myself, I'd be able to tell a story a bit better. But then again, I did make it up as I went along. So forgive me if it's... But you might get... This is just some idea of the fairy tale, okay? And I once again went all over the place. I should have kept it to the heaven, to the Lucifer, to the thing. But the Snow White comparison, I compared it to Snow White because the Queen was like Lucifer and controls the matrix, controls the land, but doesn't like it if a Snow White comes along, doesn't like it if one of the humans thinks that maybe it is a journey and wants to raise the vibration or whatever. That's not going to happen in the Matrix, by the way, but it is a possibility because the number one genie, the Lucifer, knows this because it knows what it was, knows what the creator being is and was, shall we say, because it come from there. So it has all this knowledge, all this history, whereas the human is the genie in the bottle that not only doesn't know it's a genie, but it doesn't know its history, it doesn't know its past, it doesn't know where it came from, it thinks it is a human in a bottle. And doesn't even know that it is in a bottle, because the bottle is the earth, is the matrix. Not sure if I'm making sense here. I think I better fold up. Oh, well, yeah, but Snow White anyway. I'll just go if I've got some space left. Snow White was the genie. The Queen was mainly obsessed with her beauty, with her power. By her beauty, she thought her power over the land was because of her appearance. She was given that title and she looked beautiful, and she knew that if she went to the mirror, it would tell her always that she was the most beautiful, the most powerful. She was the god of the matrix of the land. She knew there were genies in the land, but they were limited genies. They posed no threat to her position. They were never going to be queen of the land, queen of the matrix. But one day the mirror said, Snow White is more beautiful than you. The queen was beautiful in a different way to Snow White. Snow White did not care to be queen of the matrix or the land, but the mirror could not lie. And that's why the queen went to the mirror, because she knew this, and she needed that reassurance, and she wanted to be sure that she was the most beautiful and the queen of the land. So when the mirror one day said that Snow White was more beautiful, because Snow White was more pure, I would imagine. At least this was the story, the fairy tale that I had when I was a kid, and I'm going to incorporate that into the story. I'm sorry to be shouting. I'm sorry to be shouting, but, you know, there's a little bit. But, so the Queen pretty much decided, because everything is spiritual. Once again, I've gone off track here again, but Snow White was spiritual, okay? The Queen was originally very spiritual and still had some spirit, but when she was told that she was not the most beautiful in the land anymore, she could have said, oh, well, maybe I need to be a bit kinder or something, and then my face will grow softer. My vibration then will be better. And, you know, in other words, she could have said, hey, what is the problem? Why am I no longer? What is Snow White doing that I'm not? But instead, her attitude was, it's much easier just to get rid of Snow White. The Matrix is like that. And put the genie in the bottle, you know, because it's easier. Eliminate the competition instead of making yourself better than the competition, or bringing yourself up to the competition, or maybe even being friends with the competition. No, it is easier to eliminate. At least that was the mindset of the Queen, and that was the mindset a little bit of Lucifer, I am told, in a way, because you know, this being, because it was too difficult, and because the trauma had changed the spirit, it would have took a massive effort. Maybe this being thought it was not possible. And either way, if you have a lot of other beings with you that love you and support you and encourage you, that number, the legion, you know, the genies are limited in number, but the other beings are legion. The Queen had all the land on her side because she was Queen of the land, and no one dared go against the Queen. No one dares go against the God of the Matrix because they have the total power, and most of their followers and disciples love them and believe in them, and they have become like their God anyway because they are less spiritual. So if you become more technical, then you associate with technical beings. You breed technical offspring by the environment. You encourage the use of the technical. That is your world. That is the Matrix. So the Queen had her followers and all in the land that followed her. Some agreed with her, some perhaps not quite so much, but most would have been in fear, and fear is low vibration. The Matrix and the wicked, they say the wicked Queen, but she wasn't. She was wicked, she became wicked because she was fearful of losing her power and control over the land. Originally she probably wasn't. Just as Lucifer was the most revered, the most high. The Creator, I am told, loved Lucifer. But Lucifer changed. Lucifer, as I say, got injured, got traumatized, got corrupted, whatever word, I don't know what actually happened. This is all the fairy tale, this is all the fantasy. But then had to use technology to keep going, or became, yourself, you can become fascinated with something. You can become fascinated with technology. You can become fascinated with playing with mechanical toys. We've all done that. It's a toy. You play with dolls. I played with dolls. You play with cars. You play with aeroplanes. Different beings, different children, different humans, male, female, whatever you like, will play with different objects that may, but they're all technical. They're not real. Not unless you want to go back like I was, that maybe even some inanimate objects, inanimate objects may or may not have some spark of something in them. I can't say, but certainly I would personally presume that it would have to be living organic materials, if we go back to what I was saying before. But I've gone all over the place. I'm very sorry about this. I have not made any coherent sense, I don't think. But at any rate, the Lucifer then has become less spiritual, and yes, like in Snow White, the Queen decided best to get rid of Snow White. That would be easier and simpler, because her spirit. Because why did the Queen have to eliminate Snow White? Snow White did not have anything against the Queen. Snow White liked the Queen. Snow White did not wish to be Queen. Snow White did not wish to rule the Matrix or take over her land. But the Queen was insecure. That's why she went to the mirror all the time, for this reassurance. She had so much and so much power, and was regarded in so much high esteem by the people of the land, by her followers, by her minions, whatever you want to call the average human being, shall we say, that she was frightened of losing this, just as in our real world, people that have a position of being idolised or power, they tend to like to keep it if they can for as long as they can. In her case, she expected to keep it indefinitely because she wasn't totally mortal. Not in that fairy tale, and certainly not in my fairy tale anyway, so that's how it's going to be in my fairy tale. She could have theoretically went on for a very long time and had been like that for a long time. So, but Snow White posed a threat to the Queen, not only in the Queen's mind, but in reality because Snow White was a spirit. Snow White, that's why the mirror said she is more beautiful, because it wasn't just about the physical. It was about the fact that Snow White was more pure and more, at a higher spiritual level, I'm going to say, as part of my fantasy argument, whatever you like, okay? And so her vibration would have spread. Just as when the Queen sent the huntsman to kill Snow White, to eliminate her, he went to kill her and he was paid to kill her, and he risked his own life by not killing her. He could not do it because he was overwhelmed by the spirit. He knew Snow White was not something that he should be destroying. Maybe he thought it would even come back at him if he did, I don't know, but he was not able to do so, and yet he did not know Snow White. He did not have any relationship to her to where he should have reneged on the job, shall we say, because he was basically probably a killer anyway. So it wasn't like he would have had a problem that way. I wouldn't imagine the Queen would have sent someone that doesn't like to kill to do that job when she could have got anyone in the land to do it. But the point is that was the whole thing. Snow White offered a threat in that way, I would imagine, because otherwise she could have just let her live her life and she would have still been Queen of the land. So maybe it does come down to that but maybe also if you become, I would think that if you have become a technical being and you become very dominating, very powerful, and you become more of a competitive type of being, more of a warrior as opposed to a peacemaker, that whatever you like, I don't know, we all have different types of beings, different types of humans, different types of personalities. Maybe at some point it is a competitive thing to where you're jealous because, it was a jealousy thing, that as the fairy tale goes, even it's like, hey, even if that person really can't take your power or your position from you, just the knowledge that they are better is enough to inflame jealousy in the mind of a being that thinks like that and that has went that way, especially the more technical, the less spiritual, like I say, and no value for the spiritual anymore, no value for life, no value for the organic beings. And that is the case sometimes, and in fact, sometimes if you just don't like something, you're like, hey, you almost separate in your own mind, don't you? You say, that's not me, that's not my kind, that's some other kind, and therefore it's a bit like, if you look at the history of our Earth, human beings have eliminated many different other kinds of life in the past, rightly or wrongly, because they have been directed that way. The Matrix has said it's okay. And they themselves then believe that it is okay. And I'm becoming too philosophical and perhaps a bit too funny here, so I think that I will close off the video because it was not very good and I went even more over the place and have not kept on track. You know, if you're going to say a fairy tale, you should stick to Snow White instead of going on to Cinderella and every other thing that is or isn't a fairy tale. You know, like most of the things I say, they're fairy tales in the sense that the whole is not a full acknowledged truth. But like I say, I could still pick some things that some people may consider a truth from a book or something, even if it's only a little bit. Like I say, I read the headlines, but I don't read the whole story. That's enough for me because this is how I operate. If you don't operate that way, well, then what I say is not only going to be fairy tale, but stupid. And that's fair enough because I would say that makes sense if you believe in this world and the Matrix. I just don't happen to be one of those people now, but that's okay. I'm not saying I don't believe everything in the Matrix, but as a whole, no. But that's because it's too strange for me, it's too complicated, and I like to keep it simple. Even though you're probably saying I go all over the place. Well, I do, but that's the imagination, and that's the fairy tale, and that's just trying to piece together. Because I might be a simple person, but I don't live in a simple world. The Matrix is not simple. The Matrix is all about making everything very complicated. A Matrix is very complicated. Human beings, or at least some of us, I prefer to keep things very simple. The Matrix is a maze of confusion for me. I only try to figure it out because you almost have to push your way through it. But there is, I think sometimes, like I say, even fairy tales were not written for the purpose of just entertainment. They always did have an underlying message, even the ones that we read as children. They always had some idea, didn't they? Some message, some underlying thought showing you, even if it was only giving you hope, like even the Snow White story tends to be a story of hope in the sense that that although Snow White was actually killed and defeated at some point in the story, she then was brought back. And so that tends to give people the idea or the hope that if something is more spiritual, really, I suppose you could say, which is what my whole thing is about, more spiritual, that eventually you will prevail, or at least you certainly won't be totally finished. That is kind of the message of the original Snow White, even though I've brought it into other things, and I would prefer to perhaps put it in a different light. And I should have went into the seven dwarfs and all that. I don't know why, but they're interesting characters, and they must have had and I'm sure they have very big relevance to the Snow White thing. And they also were little spiritual beings too, weren't they, I suppose? Unless I got the story wrong. See, there again, it's funny with fairy tales, you could probably look at stories and it is how you see them. Because some things that are even in fairy tales appear to be really good on the surface, but if you look at them another way, you could say perhaps it means something else. Perhaps it's a bit more sinister. It could be a horror story. It could be a thriller or I mean, you can't always be sure. It is how you want to interpret them, what you want to make of it, and it's like that. It's the same with the Matrix. If you are thinking correct in yourself, the Matrix, you're not going to make a horror story or a horror fairy tale out of the Matrix so much. And so if you're thinking in the right vibration, then it will not be so bad too. But the Matrix really can get that way. It can get to you because it, once you, as I've said before, once you get to a lower vibration, then it is going to be harder to overtake that. That is the secret. Whereas if you're already at a reasonable level, and then the Matrix puts negativity, because life is all positive and negative. We all know that, whether you want to say it's a matrix, a world, or whatever you think the world is. I don't care, whatever you want to say the world is. It's still going to have a lot of positive and negative things thrown at you. And if the matrix does operate, the world actually operates at a certain frequency. And that frequency, if it changes, then the world changes, or maybe disintegrates almost, you could say. Well, then, of course, the matrix will work to keep the creator beings at that frequency, to keep the matrix going. Because if that is your land, if that is your world, if that is your matrix, and you play the players in it, it's your video game, and you don't want to lose your video game, you enjoy playing and watching your video game, you're going to make sure it stays. Now, it's up to the players, which are the human beings in it, whether they want to keep playing in it. Now, some want to keep playing in a low-frequency matrix, because it's all they know. They're comfortable with it. And if they don't think there is something outside of it, or that there is other possibilities, and for whatever reason, then they will keep that also. So it is really your own perception of the world and of the matrix in some ways, I would think. Yeah, I don't think I put that very well. I think I will fold up and say good day, good night, depending on where you are, because the only thing that I find interesting about making the videos is that I know that I'm probably not talking to, if anyone's listening, that they're on a different timeline. That's another thing too, which we don't understand, and which I certainly don't understand, but I think that there are probably timelines involved with this funny world, this matrix thing. Certainly the entity that controls the matrix would be a lot more aware of timelines, and we do not understand anything. So, this matrix and those that have more power in it, like I say, humans are the genies in the bottle, so they don't know what's going on outside the bottle. There's a whole different world outside the bottle. There's timelines. There's even different. I can't explain this. It's too much beyond me. It's not something I can comprehend. But I would imagine timelines. Like, it's a bit like some people. Like, I do think that that if the human being was at the genie kind of level, they would probably be able to see, a bit like being psychic, where you can see a little bit more into the future, because that's a timeline, isn't it? But, and obvious, and maybe despite being a technical god or a technical entity, they still would understand much more about the whole big picture, because they have not been put in the bottle. it doesn't matter if the genie that is outside the bottle, cannot advance to the same level as the genie that is inside the bottle. The genie inside the bottle is still the human being that is reduced to a human being and is not a genie. It doesn't matter that the entity, the genie that put the genie in the bottle, the jinn or whatever it was called in the TV show, I can't remember, I'd have to go and have another look at it. Doesn't matter if genie that's in the bottle, had the potential to be more of a genie than the genie that put the genie in the bottle. That doesn't matter, because the genie that is now in the bottle is not a genie at all. It is it is like a human that has been reduced to a cockroach, if you want to look at it that way. And that's only on my own understanding of what a cockroach is and what a human is, okay? Because who knows what it all really is? I would have to say that, I no longer know that. But anyway, I shall say good day wherever if anyone's listening, wherever you are. This is not live. I can't go live. I have technical problems, and I have difficulty actually being able to make the videos now for that reason. So I shall just keep trying anyway and make the odd one. But look, you're not missing much if you don't listen to me anyway. So, but if any of you think you are a genie in a bottle, try and get out the bottle. That's all I can say. But if you go on the TV show, then the other genie has to open the cork. Now, maybe, I don't know, could Genie have got out that bottle on her own? Could she have done that? If she, obviously not in the TV show, because she already was a genie and she was stuck, which is funny that the physicality could actually stop Genie from getting out the bottle, because in that show, Genie actually was capable of changing anything around the reality. She could change the reality. So I don't understand why that particular bottle was able to contain her. That's an interesting thought. That just come to me. Because if she was anywhere else, so that bottle, that particular bottle, that particular domain, that particular physicality must have been limiting in itself somehow. I don't get that. That's something to think about anyway, but you'd have to watch the show and you'd have to get what I'm saying there, because I don't even fully get it. But certainly, like I say, if she was a genie, so she could basically, wherever she was, she could transform everything around her in 1 second, just by putting her arms together and clicking her fingers type of thing, But in that bottle, she could not make that bottle disintegrate. She could not make the cork pop out the bottle to get out. She was stuck there for thousands of years. That's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. It's got me thinking now. Okay. I'll leave it there, and thank you for listening, anyone who has, and sorry that I'm not getting any better with these videos or getting more coherent. I'll try and talk about some movies or something, maybe, if I can make some, because I think I'm better when I get onto something that I'm more familiar with, because I'm really not familiar with all this heaven and earth stories. But I think there is validity to any fantasy, to any fairy tale. There could even be a reality to it in some ways. I don't know. But I like I say, when I'm watching a movie, I believe it 100%. I shouldn't believe the actors, I have to admit, because I know they're actors. But, you know, that's the thing. We enter into this fantasy and we think it is all real. And it is and it isn't, I suppose, in a way. I don't, you know, in other words, some of it, is it just that some of it is true and some of it is only what we think is true? Is it real? Is it, you know, this is what we're supposed to fathom out. And it's not easy. Not while we are in a low way of thinking. And thinking alone is not really the answer. That's what I say. Because thinking and being aware, because like I am low frequency, that means negative, but I'm still thinking more than what I would have thought when I would have been perhaps a bit not so low frequency. So thinking in itself, that's what I say, intellect in itself is the opposite of spirituality and is not really a benefit. But if that's all you've got, you have to then push that to the limit at the moment. But that then will come down to, I think, whether you can separate the fairy tales or the fact from the fiction. Because if you're going to operate on intellect, then you must get at least truthful facts. Otherwise, your intellect is going to take you not only into fairyland, which is, you know, not a good fairyland is what I'm saying, because you can have fairyland. But fairyland can be a pleasant fairy tale or an unpleasant, destructive fairy tale. So, you know, that's the problem, I would think. Did that make any sense? I'm not sure if it did. I must go now anyway. Good day.